Thomasina was born on April 29, 1945 in Philadelphia, a city with a rich musical pulse. From the moment she could speak, it was clear she was destined for the stage. Her father, Thomas Montgomery, was a politician and barbershop owner, and her mother, Jenny, was an actress. This pedigree of performance and public service gave Tammi, as she was then known, a precocious confidence. By the age of 12, she was already winning talent contests at the Earl Theater, belting out notes with a maturity that belied her years. She wasn't just a child singer. She was a prodigy with a sophisticated tonal range that caught the attention of local scouts. Her teenage years were a whirlwind of academic promise and musical ambition. She was a bright student who dreamed of medical school, but the siren call of the microphone was louder. At 15, she signed with Scepter Records, releasing If You See Bill. This early start placed her in a professional world that was ill-equipped to protect a young black girl. She was thrust into a landscape where the Chitlin circuit was the only road to success, a grueling gauntlet of smoke-filled clubs and long bus rides. It was here, in the raw infancy of her career, that the first shadows of exploitation began to loom. The architect of pain, the James Brown era at 17. Tammi, then performing as Tammi Montgomery, was handpicked by the godfather of soul, James Brown, to join his legendary revue. To the public, it was a dream apprenticeship. To Tammi, it was a descent into a private hell. Brown was a notorious disciplinarian, but with Tammi, his control crossed into horrific physical abuse. Throughout their year-long relationship, she was subjected to brutal beatings. On one occasion, she was found backstage covered in blood after Brown had attacked her with a heavy umbrella, despite the violence. She recorded I Cried under his tutelage, a song that now sounds like a literal plea for help. Her escape from Brown's clutches required the intervention of her family, but the psychological scars were permanent. She had been taught, at the most vulnerable stage of her development, that her talent was a commodity that men could claim through force. This cycle of abuse was not a fluke of her personal life. It was the blueprint for how the industry would treat her as a vessel for profit, regardless of the person inside. Motown and the temptation of David Ruffin in 1965. Berry Gordy saw her performing in Miami and immediately signed her to Motown, rechristening her Tammi Terrell. This was meant to be her golden age. Motown was the sound of young America, a hit factory of elegance and charm. However, the label's polished exterior hid a culture of negligence. Soon after joining, Tammi began a tumultuous relationship with David Ruffin. The lead singer of The Temptations, the abuse Ruffin inflicted was, by many accounts, even more severe than Brown's in a high-profile incident. Ruffin reportedly hit her with a motorcycle helmet, and another swung a heavy cane at her. Despite the visible bruises and the open secret of Ruffin's volatility, Motown's leadership did little to intervene. They viewed their artists as assets. As long as the records were selling and the tours were booked, the internal drama was secondary. Tammi was trapped in a system that marketed her as a symbol of love and joy while she lived in a state of constant terror. The Marvin Gaye partnership, a bittersweet zenith, turning point of her career and her greatest legacy came in 1967. When she was paired with Marvin Gaye, their chemistry was instantaneous and purely platonic, a rare sanctuary of genuine friendship for Tammi. Songs like Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Your Precious Love, and If I Could Build My Whole World Around You became the definitive soundtracks of the era. Marvin loved Tammi like a sister. He was captivated by her spirit and protective of her fragile state. However, the physical toll of her life was reaching a breaking point. During a performance at Hampton-Sydney College in Virginia in October 1967, while singing Your Precious Love with Marvin, Tammi collapsed into his arms. The diagnosis was devastating, a malignant brain tumor. At just 22 years old, at the height of her fame, Tammi Terrell was facing a death sentence. But for Motown, the show was a machine that couldn't be stopped. The exploitation of a dying genius. What followed is one of the darkest chapters in music history. Between 1967 and 1970, Tammi underwent 8 grueling brain surgeries. Her health deteriorated rapidly. She suffered from memory loss, partial paralysis, and eventually total blindness. She lost her hair and her weight plummeted to a skeletal 93 pounds. She was often confined to a wheelchair, unable to stand for more than a few minutes. Yet, Motown Records continued to demand content. There are harrowing reports of Tammi being brought into the studio in a wheelchair, barely conscious of her surroundings, to record vocal tracks. When she was too ill to finish the Easy album, the label allegedly had Valerie Simpson of Ashford and Simpson mimic Tammi's vocals to complete the tracks, passing them off as Tammi's to keep the revenue flowing. The industry didn't see a dying girl. They saw unreleased masters. They kept her image on album covers and pushed her records as if she were still the vibrant star she once was, hiding the reality of her suffering from the public to protect the brand's perfection. The final curtain and a mother's wrath on March 16, 1970. 6 weeks before her 25th birthday, Tammi Terrell passed away. The music world mourned the loss of a star, but those who truly knew her mourned the loss of a woman who had been systematically failed by everyone who was supposed to protect her. Her funeral at Jane's Methodist Church in Philadelphia was attended by thousands, but one notable group was missing: the executives of Motown. Tammi's mother, Jenny Montgomery, was incensed by the label's treatment of her daughter. She took a stand that was unheard of at the time, banning Berry Gordy and any Motown official from the service. She publicly blamed the label for working her daughter to death and for ignoring the domestic violence that had weakened her spirit long before the tumor weakened her body. Marvin Gaye was the only Motown affiliate she allowed to speak. He delivered a heartbreaking eulogy, so devastated by her death that he retreated into a 3-year hiatus, eventually channeling his grief and disillusionment into his masterpiece, What's Going On? The legacy, more than a victim, Tammi Terrell's life is often framed as a tragedy, but to leave it there is a disservice to her strength. In her short life, she accomplished what few ever do. She created a body of work that remains timeless. Her voice was the anchor for Marvin Gaye's career, and her resilience in the face of insurmountable pain is a testament to the human spirit. She was a woman who sang about mountains being not high enough while she was climbing a mountain of medical and personal agony. She was a pioneer who broke through the racial and gender barriers of the 1960s, providing a blueprint for the soul queens who would follow. Today we remember her not just as a victim of James Brown, David Ruffin, or Motown, but as a brilliant artist who gave the world her absolute best when the world gave her its worst. Her story serves as a reminder that behind every immortal hit, there is a human heartbeat, and it is our duty to ensure that the music never drowns out the person.